Hello everybody. It's time for a net crit vid today. I know, it's been a while. I'm also not wearing the plaid trousers, the check flannel pants, because it's boiling and I don't want to have to put on long check trousers just for a net crit vid. But I do have legs. How are you all doing? It's time for a net crit vid. We're back learning about League stuff. Now this is a video he posted for me couple of days ago, a week ago, not quite sure, who actually died in Arcane. Victor's in the thumbnail. We're going to be talking a little bit, I suppose, about the deaths in Arcane, what characters may make a return, or maybe some areas of hidden lore that I wasn't aware of, which is why I'm excited. Let's check this out. Let's see what we can learn. Real quick, speaking of the Discord, if you like talking about League, Arcane, Blue Eye Samurai, Severance, any of that kind of jazz, you like listening to music, if you like anything along those lines and you want to just come and hang out with people, including me, join the Discord. I'll leave a link in the description below. It's a cool space if you just want to talk about things that you might have mutual interests in with others, and it's just a nice little hangout space. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, come and check it out. It's good fun.
Ever since Arcane ended with Season 2, I've seen a lot of debates that are similar to other shows that also have a lot of characters with future potential. Especially if that potential might have potentially ended. Which means there is simply a lot of people who may have wondered, did he survive? Is he gone? That tuft of hair might have been funny if it wasn't foreshadowing. But in the universe of League of Legends, nothing is as simple as it may seem. In fact, things are quite complex. And so when it may seem like a character had died, in reality, there are a lot of hoops one has to jump through in order to actually die. So if you really liked the JVIC dynamic, or you appreciated Heimerdinger's jokes, or you are really wondering what happened to Jinx, well, we're diving into all of that.
Yay.
So without further ado, let's get on it. Since Arcane has a lot of characters who died, ranging from the smallest ones to the main cast, we will be mainly focusing on the main cast. In fact, let's start with one that might be an absolute guarantee. If there is one character that was fully wrapped with little to no chance of getting back, it is Ambessa.
Yeah.
So just remember that I did mention there is little to no chance of coming back. Essentially, Ambessa was kinda destined to die in Arcane. Her storyline was leading to her final destination here. And if you're wondering what storyline am I talking about? Well, remember, Ambessa got a massive book.
Yeah.
A book that talks about the history of her family, her role in Noxus, and yes, it even describes what is happening to Mel. It is a bit of a shame that the vast majority of this didn't make it to Arcane, but ultimately, Arcane was her final destination. Although, Ambessa did have a strong relationship with the Wolf, whom we know as the Wolf from Kindred. With Kindred essentially being the spiritual Grim Reaper. So in those cinematics, which also appeared in the book, you could see that Ambessa was dying, but she fought against the Wolf, which is how she got a second chance at life. So under the...
See, I need to look more into that, because I haven't read the book, but I had heard there was cinematics linked to Kindred. Okay, that might be on my radar next then. Okay.
right circumstances, in her final battle in Arcane, she might have tried to do it again and once again defied death, but in the end, her point was to pass the torch to Mel, who is now becoming one of the main characters to push the story of Noxus forward. Which means that if Riot decides to bring back Ambessa for some reason, it would undermine a lot of the story development. But just remember that modern Noxus has this one thing called hemomancy, which they are using to resurrect legendary warriors. So I wouldn't be surprised if one day we get to see Risen Ambessa in the middle of the Grey Legion. So yes, technically Riot doesn't have to be done with Ambessa just yet, which ironically is the exact same thing Noxus would have said. Now...
Okay, so... yeah, that's true. So, really, there could be an element with a Noxian progression there, where Ambessa comes back, but not as the Ambessa that we knew. It'd be sort of an altered form of Ambessa. Okay, hadn't thought about it that way. Okay.
Similarly, another character that we also have to quickly mention is Silco. Let's not talk around it. Silco is gone. He died in Zone, with Zone being known for helping people who are dying, not people who are dead. But also, just like Ambessa, should Silco be brought back somehow through Zoonite science, it would also undermine a lot of story developments. Though we have to point out that Sure, in theory, Singed could do it. He could defy
Yeah,
death
true.
through alchemy. Is there a chance this might happen? Not really.
No.
And so, for all we know, Silco is actually gone.
See, I love Silco. Silco is in my top 3 characters, probably, of Arcane. And I adored him as a character, but to bring him back, I think would undermine that entire plot that was built. So it doesn't make sense for me to bring Silco back.
But now, let's get into the more interesting characters. It is all the deaths that happened in Act 3 of the final season.
Okay.
The first death that dropped on us, unless you count the alternative universe, is Heimerdinger. Now, Heimerdinger is very interesting simply because he is a Yordle. And as some of you may know, Yordles are weird. Their lore used to be weird. It used to be about the Yordles hiding from humans because humans were kinda racist. And after all the retcons, the Yordle lore still stayed weird. But now it is weird in a cool way. And so now, after Arcane settled down, and people got a chance to reassess the situation, I can tell you with a decently high certainty that if you are mourning the death of Cecil B. Heimerdinger, you're kinda doing it for nothing because Heimerdinger should be alive. And that's for 2 entirely separate reasons. First of all, in the scene where Heimerdinger sacrifices himself to send Echo back into his normal timeline, we can see that Heimerdinger connects the machine and he fully tanks the anomaly. And while for a few frames we can actually see his skeleton, and while the previous scene was big foreshadowing of what might happen to him, the entire time you can see that while Heimerdinger is sacrificing himself, he is fine with it. He is not bothered by it, he's not scared by it. And while you may think that he is old and he is just accepting his fate, the truth is, he probably knows what his fate is gonna be all along. And that's the fact that he likely didn't get vaporized here. It is far more likely that he simply jumped into another dimension. This is why there are no traces left behind him. If he did die, like it previously happened, there would be at least a tuft of hair, which likely means that he simply keeps living his whimsical life in another dimension. And
there was a part of me that thought maybe it was that he'd gone back to like Bandle City and he'd respawned. But what he's saying here is just an alternate timeline, essentially, or an alternate dimension.
And just in case you are not sold on this idea, just in case you believe he did blow up, just like what Echo saw, there is the second reason why Heimerdinger is alive. And that is the fact that in the universe of League of Legends, Yordles are immortal. Which is a loaded thing to say, but it should be true in every sense. We know that Yordles don't die of old age, which is why they are all old. Most of the Yordles in the game date back thousands of years. Poppy was around for the foundation of Demacia, and Vygar lived through Mordekaiser torturing him. Which is also why Heimerdinger liked to talk about the history of Piltover. But the cool thing is that Yordles are also physically immortal. And that's mainly because Yordles are not physical. Their bodies are made out of magic. This is also why they are so elusive. Should you want to catch a Yordle, you would have to use magic in the first place. And should a Yordle quote-unquote die, their bodies get transferred back into Bandle City, which is the Yordle homeland in the Spirit Realm, after which we don't really know what the resurrection process looks like, but in the story of Vex specifically, we learned that Yordles cannot truly die. In fact, Vex is nihilistic because she hates living. She hates the whimsical life of Yordles, but she has to suffer it eternally. Because being a Yordle herself, she simply can't escape it. Meaning that she is stuck in a never-ending cycle. Which also means that in the scenario where hypothetically Heimerdinger died in Arcane, what really happened is that he just got transferred back into the Spirit Realm, and now he's likely getting ready for more adventures. And so already, you can cross one character off of the death list. And so next, let's have a look at Vander, also known as Warwick now. Now, Vander is interesting because technically, he did die.
Just real quick before he talks about Vander, I actually think if they was to do a spin-off, like a Fortiche-based spin-off, a Heimerdinger spin-off would be amazing. Like seeing the young Heimerdinger, because we're already familiar with Piltover, so to see almost like a flashback of Piltover and what it was before what we knew through the show, and then see like young Heimerdinger and the progression of that, I actually think would be a really amazing, like, even if it was just a 1 hour spin-off or something. A bit like how, they did with like episode 7, where they just created like an alternate reality episode. I think they could do like things like that, like a 1 hour spin-off. A Heimerdinger one I think would be very, very cool, personally. It would actually be one that I'd be excited to watch, because I found Heimerdinger almost annoying in the show at some points. But to see more of his history and learn more about him, he was a character out of all of them, I looked at and I was like, I want to see what you were before the show. He was one character that stood out to me personally.
Let's have a look at Vander, also known as Warwick now.
Yes.
Now, Vander is interesting because technically he did die. That's what the entire scene with Victor and Singed was about. We could see inside Vander's soul, and we saw how the beast erased all traces of humanity. In other words, that's when Vander truly died. Although, theoretically, there are still shreds of Vander visible in his final scene with Jinx, but that one is open to interpretation. When it comes to Warwick specifically, however, there is something interesting that could happen. Of course, we know that in the final scene of Arcane, we can see Jinx blow up a grenade and take down Warwick with her. But the entire scene was filled to the brim with open back doors, one of which could be an open door for Warwick in the future. To be honest, the chances of us ever seeing Warwick again are near zero. However, we know that there are a lot of League of Legends enjoyers who like the Wolfie version more, which is the state Vander never reached in Arcane. Arcane just turned him into some kind of a hybrid. Well, at the end of Arcane, we never really learned what happened to his body. And seeing how former Singed would be able to shape him into more of a wolfy person, which is the one we know from League, technically, in the future, Riot can continue Warwick's story, and through science, that hybrid could be pushed into the full bestial potential. So, long story short, is Warwick dead? Highly likely. But can Riot bring Warwick back in case they need him for something like the MMO or something else in the future? Yes, there are ways they can easily pull this off. And it seems like these back doors were left open on purpose.
It seems like they could bring any character back, really. Because even if you just do a spin-off, you could just... You don't even need to make something in the future, you just make something in the past.
Now, since we already mentioned Vander, we also have to point out Jinx. Here, I am pretty sure everyone has seen the theories, everyone has seen all the screenshots and Easter eggs.
Noticed it.
And so yes, I am pretty sure Jinx is alive. In fact, her entire storyline is set up in a really cool way for future storytelling. Essentially, what happened is that Jinx convinced everyone that she died. The only one that is suspicious about that is Caitlyn, because Caitlyn saw the scene where they couldn't find a trace of Jinx's body. All they saw were scraps of her explosives. She also found one of the escape vents. In the final scene, we could see the little smudge of Jinx's escape. And so all of this seems to be a perfect setup for a story in the future where Vi and Jinx meet again. All the while, Vi believes that Jinx is dead. And when that happens, I hope Riot has something extremely good planned out.
So do
because
I.
that's gonna be a moment everyone's gonna be looking forward to. And so in summary, is Jinx dead? Extremely likely no. Though on that note, I also wouldn't expect to see Jinx in a new story in the near future. Which leaves us with just one final major death in Arcane, which is Victor and Jace. Now, this one is interesting because we have two sources of information that go against each other, but they do line up for one major outcome. You see, at the end of Arcane, the premise is that Jace and Victor sacrifice themselves to destroy Hextech. They do this after tapping into potentially celestial magic, where they use the acceleration rune to vaporize themselves. In fact, in one of the Aftertalk episodes, where the creators of Arcane talk about some big questions, it is mentioned that Jace and Victor got vaporized, and ultimately, that's how they ended. However, you may remember that we also got one extra interview, where Christian Link mentioned that despite what happened in Arcane, they are gonna keep exploring the stories of Victor and Jace. Now, this can be explained in two different ways. Either they can delve further into their stories going back in time, so we get stories from when they were younger, though to some degree, Arcane already covered that. Or there is the thing that they are in fact not really dead. At least not in the way that you may think. You see, if you look into the circumstances of Victor tapping into the Arcane, becoming one with magic, and getting on almost celestial level, there is nothing that could disprove the fact that Victor could in fact become a celestial being.
Yeah, see, I
In
wondered that.
fact, that wouldn't be the first time this has happened. While most League players will know about the story of the Aspects, who are essentially people who conquered Mount Targon and became vessels for celestial beings, there are also cases where mortals became the Celestials themselves. One such case came from Tiari. Tiari was originally a Solari who didn't align with their ideals, and so they sought answers in climbing Mount Targon. On this journey, they teamed up with a Noxian and a Demacian, both of whom perished on the journey, but Tiari didn't. By following the wisdom of the Protector, they reached the peak, they met with the Arbiter, and in the end, Tiari the Traveler became the Traveler, a celestial being of Mount Targon.
Ooh.
Now, what does this remind me of? Well, if you ask me, there is a pretty high chance Victor and Jace met the same fate. With Victor already being in a near celestial state, Riot could do something really cool here. They can, canonically, join their bodies, where both Victor and Jace would become a single entity. Once again, this is nothing new. League has done this many times in the past.
Have they?
So by doing this, Riot could play into the JVic fandom, they could honor the lore in a really cool way, and they could continue exploring their stories. This is why the creators might have confirmed that Victor and Jace are dead, but at the same time, after they died, there are ways for them to explore their stories.
Oh, wow.
Which, once again, is only the case because we are dealing with the universe of League of Legends. It is kinda really hard to die here. And so that's pretty much it for all the major characters I wanted to talk about. So what did we learn? Ambessa is pretty much gone, but the Grey Legion has a way to resurrect her. Heimerdinger is likely continuing his adventure somewhere in the Spirit Realm. Vander is most likely gone, though there were shreds of him in the last scene, with Warwick being potentially brought back by Science. Jinx is definitely alive. I don't think Riot wants to throw away that character.
No
and
way.
Victor and Jace are technically dead, but their characters can very easily be turned into Celestials. Which means, while it was really cool to see some permanence coming from Arcane, should Riot really want to, Riot can throw away all the character development and bring all of them back.
Yeah, he's right though, because that's the way Riot, that's the way they play it, is let's leave things looking like it's finalised and that this big thing has happened, but at the end of the day they could just completely 180 it and bring a character back, whether they do it through, like I said, magic, or turning it into a celestial being, or just literally doing flashbacks and showing more story than what you originally see in that chronological order. Just go back and show more, which would be really, really cool. I think is there a character I'd like for me, Heimerdinger, seeing something with his past and learning about him would be really interesting. I also think the concept of a young Silco, or more of that, but then we've kind of seen a lot of the story of Piltover and Zorn and why it came the way it did. We saw a lot of that in Arcane, so they wouldn't do. I would like a Jinx future plotline with Vi. Caitlyn can be there as well, I'm completely cool with that. And then, see Mel carry on the Noxus story and what that could do. Oh, they could honestly do anything, and I really hope they do. Are we going to get a 40 show? Who knows? There's some people say yes, some people say no because it's not confirmed. There's rumour they're filming possibly a live action thing. It's possibly Bilgewater themed as the current theory. I mean, whatever they go on to do, I think it'll be good. But for me, I'd love to see more Fortiche based stuff. I love the animation of Arcane. I love what they're building there with Fortiche in terms of that style and that way of doing things. I would personally want to see more of that, in my opinion. But genuinely, what's yours? If you could pick a character that we've seen in Arcane to do a spin-off, whether they're alive or dead, however you want to look at it, what character would it be? And if you could see a spin-off of any League champ or any character in the League universe, who would it be? I want you to let me know below, because I'm interested and I might want to look into a few ideas if you have any. If you did enjoy this, give it a thumbs up, always helps out the channel. As always, go check out Netgrid, though I'm sure most of you will know who he is at this point, but I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. Subscribe, put notifications on, that way you won't miss any more future videos, and I'll see you very, very soon with some more fun stuff. Take very good care of yourself, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.